in the middle of it because I've got a cat running around here. And what perfect time to go live.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our panel. We're doing one on, so I've published my first draft, now what? And so I'm going to let the people here introduce themselves so that everybody can get their names and their companies and their recs. Let's start with Rep, because you're up in my right-hand corner.
I'm Rep Bruno. I'm an author and publisher. So I own and operate Athon Books.
And Abby?
I'm Abby Goldsmith, author of Majority, and my first book just came out. I have a 6-book deal with Podium Publishing. I just got a bookmark here to show you because I'm on the road.
Nice. Love you too, Brian.
So let's go ahead and head it over to Dimi.
Hi, I'm Dimi. I write LiterPG books and I run 500 Publishing, which translates said LiterPG books to Germany and publishes there.
And does an awesome job at it. Hi, everybody. I'm Jez. For those of you that don't know me, I'm obviously a published author, first of all, through LitRPG. I've got 18 books out, and who's Rat Bruno?
That's what I get for trying to answer comments.
And I'm also one of the directors of Legion Publishers, which we started up this year. So we're all a bit crazy here.
A little bit.
A little bit.
So then we've had everybody introduce themselves, although apparently Dimi is obviously the favorite here from the comments.
Totally is.
But now Abby's getting some love, so there's positivity. But nobody seems to like Jez, which isn't surprising.
I'm used to it, really. You know, I'm married. I'm used to the abuse.
But so we'll start off with some basic questions, since we'll go into some generic pieces, since a lot of people haven't come through with any questions yet. But let's start with, when you write your first book, what do you think the first step should be after you complete your draft?
Are we all just jumping in, or do you want to start with one of us in particular?
I didn't see anybody getting excited, but we'll go with let's start with Dimi, since he has the most love in the chat.
When you finish, let's say your first draft, okay, let's say it's the first book, you haven't worked with anyone yet. I would say start looking into. So hopefully you have connected with some authors, so you have gotten some feedback while writing, etc. But you haven't connected with someone professionally. So I think it would be a good time to start looking, or even before that, to start looking for a cover artist and an editor. So these two people, especially the editor, is the most important. So let me not give general advice. It was the most important person for me in order to become a better author. You might think that your manuscript is perfect, but there are certain things that you just cannot see, like scratch words or pacing. So if you find a good editor, I think it will make your writing, your craft a lot better, and it will make writing a lot more enjoyable, because you will start seeing things that you did not see beforehand. So if it's one thing to choose, I would say connect with an editor, especially someone who's writing in your genre, and even better if they are recommended by another author that you know and trust.
Okay. And for clarity, it sounds like you're recommending predominantly a developmental editor.
Developmental. So that's the thing. The developmental editor is great. I think once you have some books out and you know what your workflow is, I think when you start out, a line editor or a copy editor would be best. And this, of course, now I'm talking in the case of self-publishing, right? If you go through a publisher, that would be taken care of by them. So it would be a different path, which I suppose someone else would be better equipped to answer that.
Fair enough. Rhett, do you have anything you'd like to add? Or
Yeah, I mean, before you do all that, I would say reread your book and just give it a read through. But really, it kind of depends what path you're taking. Obviously, this is the age of web serials, and so maybe your first draft was written there, and so you're kind of getting that dev edit from the community. If you're not doing that, the reason I think that places like that are so great is the best thing you could do as an author is get feedback from people that aren't friends and family. Yes, a lot of strangers are just going to give you crap feedback or just stuff that isn't great, but that is where you're going to find your readers. It's where you're going to find feedback that helps, and it's free. You know, there's critique groups all over the place, and that's stuff you could do before paying an editor to take a look at it, because editors, especially good ones, can be pricey. Getting with a publisher isn't always a guarantee. So really getting feedback on something you wrote is super important. And obviously identify what you want to do with it, right? If you want to do it yourself, if you want to work with a publisher, like really research the market, not just for books, but specifically for your genre, because that's what matters the most, and figure out and learn everything you can. I mean, writing a book is actually the easy part, right? Like, you know, we get hundreds of submissions a week, so clearly a lot of people are writing books. It's the next step that really will determine if you're going to sell them or not.
I would definitely go with the reread your book at the end of it. But the best advice that I got from another author when I was first starting out was from Luke Chemlenko, which was that, you know, when you work on your book, don't change it. Essentially, you know, start at point A, right all the way to point Z or whatever it is. Finish the damn book. Don't keep going back and changing and editing, and because you'll change the whole feeling of it, and you'll never ever finish that draft. His advice to me was that when you get to the point you can't stand it any longer and you hate the book, just yeet it out of the window and set it free. And the problem that we always have as authors, I think as an author primarily, is that I know it's just special, that's why, is that we always, you know, if you start at this point and you write all the way to this point, it's 100,000 words, 1,000,000 words, whatever you've written, you are categorically better at your craft by the time you get to the very end. And your temptation at that point is to go back to the very beginning and go, well, I am 1,000, 100, 1,000,000, whatever words better and more experienced. I think I should go back to the beginning and I'll just fix it. And your temptation is to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and you will never get it perfect. Also, remember, grumpy bearded men, damn right. Also, a piece of advice that we often give out to people is that if you think of the way that you write a scene, you as the author might have rewritten this scene 5 or 6 times. Some bits have been cut out, some bits have been put in, it's been twisted, it's been changed 1,000 ways, whatever it is. You now have all this information about the scene which no longer exists in the book, but it's still there in your head. You know all this, but all the reader is going to be able to read. A lot of times, it doesn't right, yeah, and sometimes it does, dude. It really does, for me personally. But the only thing the reader ever sees is what is actually in book. So if you want to envisage the scene, and then imagine a keyhole. Imagine that you are standing behind the keyhole and you are looking through that keyhole. You don't get to see the whole rest of the room. You just see exactly what's in front of you. And what you see in front of you is exactly what you've written there. So I know when I've written through and people have commented on the books and say, oh, well, when you did this and when you did that. And it's like, I have no memory of this place. Very much a sort of Gandalf moment of, I don't know what the fuck's going on. Because you've changed things so many times you don't know what gets in. So always finish the whole damn book. Do one hard pass. Literally, just do a whole pass. Make notes as you go when you're writing it if you need to, and then you can put those notes in. You can add them in, and you'll. Bob needs to meet Sally on chapter 26 or thereabouts. Just jot that in a separate document. Come back to it later. That way you can finish your entire draft. And if you've got a line of sort of notes that you know you need to put in, you'll go through it faster because you know you need to put these bits in. And then when you finish, just finish it. Make a decision as to what you're going to do with, you know, whether it's going to go out to publishers, if you're going to do it yourself, if you're going to find editors. And remember that editors, good editors, are booked massively in advance. One of our editors is booked up until 2025 nearly. So, you know, it's if you want a really good editor, hey, There's nothing wrong with that. If you want a good editor, there will always be cancellations where people have dropped out and there's a space that's turned up. But 9 times out of 10, really good editors, you're going to be waiting a while before you see them. So work to a deadline and reach out to your editors before you're ready. Definitely with covers, spend the money. I'd recommend it personally anyway.
And Abby, got anything to add since there's been quite a bit of talking from a mansplaining, angry, grumpy guy?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm the object lesson in rewriting. Don't do what I did. Yeah, I did that. So, I wrote my 1 million words, then my 2 million, and then my 3 million by rewriting my series, and especially the first book over and over. I was aiming for a big 5 traditional publishing deal, which I should not have been. They just aren't looking for certain kinds of fiction. So I didn't quite realize that at the time, and it took a while to learn it. But anyway, I'm proud of the final product, and I do have a tendency to be a perfectionist. But I definitely would say I wish I had published earlier and sooner. There's a point of diminishing returns when you're rewriting, basically. Even if you're aiming for perfection, even if you do think you're improving it, everyone else is as well. Like, just there's always another book to write. So, yeah.
Fair enough. And we've had a couple of questions come in. We'll start with one from Kyle. And that's, what is the process when it comes to choosing the authors you want for your publishing company? And we'll also include, or looking for a publishing company that you would want to work with, for those of you not running a publishing company. And we'll start with Abby this time, since we made her go last.
I mean, any club that'll have me is maybe a club that isn't worth joining. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's all about, like, where is it going to fit, which publisher is handling the type of subgenre, and how well are they doing it, and so forth. I mean, we're all pretty familiar, I think, with, there's not that many publishers in, like, the heroic fiction lit RPG space. So, yeah, you have a number of options to choose from, and they're all pretty good. But yeah,
Fair. And let's go to Rhett next.
Yeah, man, as far as starting with how we choose our authors, tons of different ways. We have a submissions portal where we find people. These days, it can mostly be through referrals. People we know, right? Like, a big part of publishing that people don't realize is the personality fit. Again, we're pretty big. We have a lot of stuff, and we always keep our submissions open to sign things and bring on new authors. The better they fit personally with working with us, that's great. It keeps things smooth and everything. So, that's important. But yeah, I mean, you could go through submissions on our website. If you know an author, get a referral. There's tons of ways. Sometimes we do go out looking for specific stuff and reaching out to an author that we want, whether we find their book on Royal Road or somewhere, or we know the author in general, like they're a big name author that's sold on Amazon and we want to work with, or something like that. So there's tons of different ways. And then as far as choosing a publisher, again, knowing which subgenre is super important. That's a really important thing that Abby said, because every publisher handles them different. That's the same with the big 5. Like, all the big 4 have specific imprints for specific things. If you're chasing trad pub, that has to be what you chase. The moment you step off that and go indie, you're an indie author, and you probably have no chance with them because they have no interest in indie authors. They want people that play their style of game, and you can make money that way, but it is really hard and completely different than what we do. If you're going with indie publishers like us, Legion, there's tons of them. Not tons of them in the specific genre, but there's tons out there. Obviously you can reach out to all of them, submit if you're lucky enough to have multiple acceptances. Then it sort of becomes about fit, and also what you're looking for. Is higher royalties more important to you than a guaranteed advance up front? Or are there certain sub rights that the publisher is big in with audio, comic, or something that are important to you versus something else? Do you get along with an author there and stuff like that? Again, like, when it comes to indie, it is more of a community than Trad Pub. I worked with Random House. I signed with Random House. I didn't meet any Random House authors. It's not a thing. When we sign authors, we have a group of authors. They all talk. You all get along. So that is part of the indie community. So again, it is really about identifying how you want to do this. If you're prolific and write really fast, maybe an advance isn't that important because you could get out the next thing. And if this is your main thing, getting some guarantees up front can't hurt because this might be the only thing you ever finish writing. So you have to identify if this is a side gig or do you want to pursue it full time. All those are important conversations to have with yourself when you're choosing a publisher. And then, of course, looking at their track record and your subgenre is important. But, every publisher is going to have failures. Look at Amazon. Amazon breaks all the time. Audible ranks were delayed by, I think, 5 to 7 days, like the last 2 weeks, and that'll kill a launch. So, there's always factors that you aren't going to understand when you're just looking on Amazon and seeing how things performed.
Cool. And let's go over to Dimi next.
Yeah, gonna step on what something that Red said as when it comes to how you choose a publisher. I think this is a very important decision and something that numbers are important, but you also have to do with people. So if you write a trilogy or an even longer series, this means that you will be in touch a lot with your publisher. So it needs to be someone that you can trust and someone that you can get along well with. The publisher and of course every person who you will work with when you're under that publisher, the editors, the artists, etc. And I know that especially in our genre, there are publishers that are very well connected in terms of face-to-face, let's say, with their authors. And I think this is very important because writing is a very solitary profession. We don't get to hang out with people a lot unless if it's in conferences. So I know that some publishers in our genre make like excursions, I don't know, like 3-day trips with all of their authors. And this is something that you will not get if you're an indie. Or maybe it might be important to you when you consider who you sign with. Now, on the publisher side, who I would sign, how would I select? It's a little different because I generally take books that are already published and translate them, so it's easier to select people. There are reviews. I can check if the book was written well. If there are some bad reviews, why the bad reviews? What's the reason for that, and if that would translate to the German audience. And it's also important that the genre is what is hot in Germany, because what's hot in the States right now is not hot in German. So apocalypse books are not as hot in Germany as they are in the US, while VR is still hot in Germany. So you don't need to, let's say, sign the big names, because big names in the States are not necessarily big in Germany, but good books will sell regardless, especially if it's on a hot genre in Germany. Yeah.
And Jez.
Yeah, no, I'll have to agree with all of that, to be honest with you. For us, as publishing side of it, we primarily look at the quality of the writing. There are some of the submissions which have been made to us, which, unfortunately, as much as we'd love to be able to say to everybody, yeah, fantastic, we'll help, there are some that have been submitted to us where you just say, look, I'm sorry, but it's not for us at this time, good luck elsewhere. Others times we read through and it's literally a case of, this is fantastic, we want to sign this straight away because of the quality of the writing. Sometimes it's something in between, and it's literally a case of, we will work with you, we'll give you suggestions and say, well, look, this is where we think you're doing great. This is where I think you're doing poorly. This is our advice only. You can take this with a pinch of salt. You can tell us to sod off. You can do what you want. We would recommend you change these bits and you tweak this, aim in that direction, whatever it is. Feel free to come back to us with this. If not, no hard feelings. Thanks very much. Rock on. Very much as Demi said there, we are by nature solitary animals. We are literally cooped up in our office all day, every day, hammering away if we're not at work somewhere else. So we don't get to see people very often. So it's important that the people that you sign with, if you are going to sign, are a support network for you. They are people that you get on with, that you can talk to, that you can have banter with. from a personal point of view, because I need that. I need people around me to be able to talk to now and then. I have that, thankfully, with a group of great friends, so it really does help. So we write together on Discord, and we abuse each other constantly. With the side of things as an author looking for a publish house, I would say it's probably a case of, look for the people that you want to work with, but also a piece of advice that I would give is some of the submissions that we've gone back to people have said, oh yes, well, I fixed all those things in later drafts. Well, that's fantastic. Why didn't you send us the later draft? Don't send us the one that's, oh, this is what I've done up to date. There you go. And then when we come back to you and say it's not going to work for us because of X, Y, and Z, say, oh, well, that's fine. We fixed all that later on. Why didn't you send us that copy?
Oh, cover letters is a whole different discussion. We've gotten some insane ones, so yeah.
Yeah, and I think something that you guys have both meant, or at least two of you have mentioned pretty heavily, is that the feedback you get when you do when you submit and they provide it back is usually going to be very, very helpful, because they're obviously people who are already targeting your specific niche or genre. And so the feedback that they can provide you will definitely guide you in a better direction. And it's something to at least take to heart. I know it doesn't always fit. And sometimes you go, hey, that's not the story I wanted to tell. But that's why they've ultimately decided not to go with you.
Just don't always expect feedback, because it is rare from any publisher, because again, like, we're not Big Four and we get like 100 a week. So it's
exactly. I'll agree with that one. I'm saying when we do give feedback, it's because we want to sign you. It's just a case of you're that far from, because the hours that we've got to spend not doing anything else that we're involved in, any of the other jobs that we're doing, our own writing or doing anything that we're spending on this instead, there's got to be a predicted outcome from that.
Awesome. And so we have a couple of other questions that have come up. And so Brian Norden has asked a very interesting question.
He would.
Yeah, he usually does. And he was asking for more information on the various publishing services to give people an idea of the costs. Specifically, what are the costs involved in each step of the process, bringing a draft to published into market, and basically what was the scale, serviceable versus great. And let's go ahead and start with Rhett this time.
Obviously we can't share the prices of the people we work with, but it really depends on the people, and spending more does not. I've worked with editors that cost insane amounts and they can be horrible, and work with newer editors that are charging pennies and they're great. So it is really about testing people and finding out how good they are. Again, if you're self-publishing, you have to reach out to all these people and try them. And honestly, referrals and knowing people that have worked with them is probably the best way to go. But just, finding an editor that says they're amazing and charges 10 grand doesn't mean that they're worth 10 grand when an editor that costs $500 will do. So the costs vary for us as a publisher. We have people on retainer and employees and stuff. So there's not really pricing that is available to others because they are working for us. But do your research and test people. Exactly. Me and Steve on a book that we published with a big print publisher. He writes as Jamie Castle, so we write together, and we were given an editor that has worked on one of the most famous book series ever. I won't share what it is because then you'll find the name, but ever. And this editor dev and line edited our book, and we had 41 changes throughout the entire book. And it's not no book is perfect enough to get that much. It was just a phone in. And so, when you're spending that much on editing, it really does not guarantee you're getting a great job. And that's the same with cover artists. People all around the world, if you're an artist in Argentina, you can make a living charging a lot less than an artist living in San Francisco. And so really it's about finding the right people. There's no cost associated with that stuff. Marketing kind of has its base costs, but people are, it's not a you get what you pay for type of industry.
Jez?
Some of that I definitely agree with it. Some of it I disagree, and you get what you pay for. Some of the I've worked with some editors that have been fantastic, and some that haven't. As Rhett says there, we had one, fortunately, that we worked with that just didn't work out. We've had others that have tried to phone it in, and then we've had some that are absolutely fantastic. The cover art, though, I'm always a big believer in invest in your cover art. Don't just slap a cheap cover on it.
Oh, for
When
sure.
I was first, the artist we first worked with was brilliant, and then he got snatched up by Magic the Gathering, so that kind of put an end to that. And when I was looking for another artist to replace him, one of the artists that came back to me, I was looking on ArtStation, and he came back with a quote of 6,000 for the cover art, 3,000 up front, couldn't tell me when he would start the cover. He's that busy, can't tell me when, and I would have use of it 6 times. So I could use it on my cover, but every single advert that I run counts as a use. After that, he expected a percentage of the book's earnings. So that gives you an idea of how realistic it was. And this was a guy, obviously I won't name names, but this was a guy that had he had the least experience of all of the artists that I'd reached out to. And one of the guys that had come back to me and that we were chatting with was the lead designer for LucasArts. He certainly wasn't interested in working with me, but he was one of the guys who'd come back, and I, being ignorant of the way things worked, I'd reached out to him thinking, oh, he's an artist, he might want to work with us. And he's sort of very kind and very like, oh, not really for me, mate. But he wasn't asking for that kind of money and for those kind of rates. But nobody was asking for it, because you will find that people out there will chance it. They will try and get anything they can. So always do due diligence. Do your background research on any of the artists and on your editors. Really ask around. The best recommendations for editors will come from your peers. Don't take somebody that isn't involved in the genre at all, because they won't understand a lot of it. And their advice, always remember that editor's advice is advice. You can take it or you can leave it. It is not, you must do this to do a successful book, you must follow these steps. Because frankly, if they could say, if you do this, this, and this, it will be a best-selling novel, they wouldn't be editing, they would be writing, and they would be keeping that money themselves.
Yes, I think we did agree. One quick thing to add is don't Google standard industry price.
Yeah, because you don't want to.
When you get an editor that says, "Oh, I charge standard industry price," and you do the math, you're like, "Oh, that's like 10 grand for an edit." Don't pay that as an indie ever, because you will find someone just as good for cheaper. It's a ridiculous price to pay. Yeah. Again, what Steve said. Yeah, you don't get what you pay for means expensive can be just as good as cheap. It really depends on the person and the work.
Yeah.
But the industry pro rates are typically from the Big Four, which means it's defined by people who are there full time. And those editors aren't just editing, they're managing the entire project and everything. So when you see those rates, those aren't really going to translate to any indie editors that are working full time. You'll meet them and they're desperate for work because few people are paying that much.
Yeah.
But those prices don't tend to translate well to the indie world, because Google doesn't really pull things from the indie world. So just be wary of that.
And Abby, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, well, I can't really add to this too much because I have not really self-published in any big way. So, I'm working with a publisher, so they're doing the work for me, the research to find the artists and all that.
Timmy?
I think what Brian is mentioning now is a very good idea. It's very important. There are costs. Okay, let's. So if we want to say specific numbers, I think so. Editing, of course, depends on how big your book is, right? If it's like 100,000 words, you can expect roughly, let's say, $1,500 for that. There are cheaper, there are more expensive. This is like an average that I have in my head when I'm calculating costs. Covers, it can be from 500 to 1,500. I would say it's too big. But there is also a hidden cost. There is an opportunity cost of when you're trying to find these people that you're working with and you're spending time with them, and you can lose a lot of time and a lot of writing days when you get hung up on an artist that is great, artistically, but doesn't get back to you or doesn't give you the covers. And then you get frustrated because your deadline is coming in and you need the cover, and you get all this stress that you don't need as a creative. So you're losing days of writing. How much does one writing day cost for you? And this cost was taken out because of that person. So like Brian said, if you go with a publisher, they hook you up with these people that they have worked with. And if in the future you are more, you would like to try it, let's say yourself, you already have made these connections and you know who is what in your little genre. So you know the prices, you get the knowledge for free, or let's say as a happy plus. Yeah.
Those are good price ranges too. Like if you're paying above those, definitely research and think, especially if you're indie, because like it's your money, it's not a publisher's money.
I would add as well that obviously when you're looking at your different editors, you might not be. We do personally, but it's a case of you're looking. Yeah, very much, Steve. That's what
I don't think we were talking about pre-production. I think,
yeah.
But yeah.
Well, you're saying that you're looking at basically development editing, you're looking at line editing, you might be looking at science and continuity editing, which we do for usually a second and third book onwards in a series, where you have somebody that specifically looks back at the earlier books and says, look, John is 6'2" in this book, well, he's 6'1" in this book. What happened to that inch? Has he lost it? And just checking on those kind of details to make sure that you go forward. But if you're looking at a dev editor, then you're looking at a line editor, then you're looking at continuity. If you're looking and you've got a grade at 100,000 words for $1.5 grand, say that's $4.5 grand. Now look at it if it's a 200,000 word document, that's now $9 grand. Now add on your cover, which is, as Demi said, 500 to 1,500 to $2.5 grand, whatever it is. You're now looking at least 10 grand for a book to launch, plus formatting costs, but everything else. So some of this is massively different in that, you can get a dev editor that's much, much cheaper. You can get well, we're saying nothing about that portion. You can get a line editor that's much, much cheaper. It just depends on how things work out. So, we're comparing apples and oranges on prices, unfortunately.
Well, and know the value of each thing, right? If your proofer is charging the same amount as your dev line copy editor or whatever, then you get a new proofer. Like everything has a different value. You could kind of go with a gut feel on that.
Yeah.
And that could change from person to person as well, based off of how your writing style is or what you're working with.
Some authors are so clean, like they barely need a proof, and that really does depend on the author.
Yeah, I would agree. I've seen that quite a few times with people I've worked with, which I think leads pretty heavily into another good question that was featured in here from Josh, and that's, is it better to bring a full trilogy to a prospective publisher or just a book one? Go ahead, Red.
Well, I mean, it's very rare someone's presenting a fully written trilogy. Is it better to propose a trilogy versus a standalone? In this genre, absolutely. Right? This is science fiction, fantasy, especially indie. You're not looking at the really heady trad pub stuff. Is a series genre. Like this is a series market. So yeah, propose a trilogy. If you have them all written, that's great. You can get things rolling faster. But this is a series market where you want the books to be coming out at a consistent and pretty fast rate to have the best chance at Amazon, at Audible, at hitting all the right algorithms and selling the best. So yeah, the one thing we'll say, and I think I saw it in the comments from Steve earlier, is no publisher wants to see you propose your 20 book epic, and you shouldn't either as an author. Create arcs, 3-4 book arcs where you have a get off point, because the amount of sales you need to sustain a series that's beyond 3 or 4 books is very high, and most books don't hit that. The best thing you could do is then, end the series and jump on a new one. That's your best chance at getting a bestseller, is to start something new if you didn't get it to begin with. Signing 20 books, no one wants to do that, because if book one fails, you're on the hook for 19 books that aren't going to make any money. And like I said earlier, Amazon can break. You could have something all set to be a huge hit and Amazon breaks that week. Nothing a publisher, anyone can do to turn that around. Like you just can't plan for things that long. It's just not a thing. And it's, Wheel of Time and all those things wouldn't go on that long unless they sold. There's tons of series that didn't sell and ended, and you just don't hear about them. Those things keep going because they sold, and the author is paid to keep writing them. So you kind of have to look at it that way.
Abby, what about you?
I mean, whoops, I wrote a 6-book series, but I mean, yeah, like for me, it's passion, like I'm writing for fun. But yeah, like it is a big mystery. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out like what is the best-selling art formula. I'm always trying to figure it out. I don't know. I'm not sure anybody really knows. So, yeah.
Fair enough. Jimmy.
I think if you ask 10 different best-selling authors, you're going to get 10 different answers, though, on what's the best-selling author, what's the best-selling formula. Everybody does things totally differently. So one thing just jumping in there, I know, but one piece of advice I would really give people is don't ask for too much advice from people, because you might have a dozen really good friends who are all writers, who all chuck in, and if you listen to all of them, you're going to end up with a hodgepodge book that has no definable character or flavor to it, and it's that definable character and style that people will fall in love with. And if you listen to all these people and they help you when you polish book 1, you're going to need to listen to all these people and they're all going to help you polish book 2. Otherwise, it's going to taste totally different.
That's great advice. Writing advice from Stephen King and Brandon Sanderson, as great as they are, is not of value to anyone in here, because 99% of their success is luck. When you get to that outlier level of success, it is luck, right? There's probably tons of things as good as those books. Those made the sale. So advice from that level of author is really going to be hard to benefit a newer author.
Definitely.
Jimmy, what about you?
So in my case, I select books to be translated, right? So I think this makes things a little clearer. I know if books are going to be successful because they were successful in the US. So I know that I should pick up a longer series or a short series. If you are an author and you are deciding how to write, I would suggest putting some jumping points or some points in your book series that you can loop it and close it. So if it is, so you start with 3 books. Let's say you write a trilogy. If you see it is successful, and of course, what every person considers successful is a different thing. I think of it if my book 2 picked on a higher rank than book 1, and my book 3 picked on a higher rank than book 2, then I'm on an upward trend. So I push it to book 5. Of course, you have to have some idea of how the story is going to grow like that. You can just stretch it, right? If it's still going there, let's say book 8 or book 9, something like that. Of course, I would love to write the same characters for 20 books, but very, very, very few people get to do that. So I don't want to think like that. I started like that, and I had to end the series early. I had to end the series even earlier, and it's very, very, it's soul-crushing when you're writing book 3, and because you have to please a few people that are writing the series, but you know that book 3 is not going to, or book 5 is not going to sell as well. So I would say try for a trilogy and leave some hooks open to something grander in size.
Yeah, and I saw something from Max, so I just wanted to refine what I think me and Jez were talking about is taking writing advice and stuff like that about the skills of writing for someone like Sanderson and Stephen King. Like, that's great. But this panel is, my book is finished. What next? Taking sales advice from people who have been bestsellers since before there was internet instead,
it's a bit of a different world. I mean, it's a different world now to a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, you saw his Kickstarter, right? He created a Kickstarter, and all of a sudden, every author I knew thought they could do the same thing. I was like, well, you don't have millions of followers. And Brandon Sanderson, he talked about the audio rates, and he's like, I'm not using Audible. And I was like, I'm not going to use Audible. They're evil. And then they didn't sell somewhere else. And he could do whatever he wants and sell whatever he wants. For a newer author to say no to Audible is basically tossing out your chance to have any success on audio. So that's where the advice, and I think me and Jez are saying, like, these bestsellers that are huge names like that, there's a lot of luck involved. They are outliers. They didn't have to do the things that Grinders, as a publisher, we tend to learn the most about new tactics and sales from those midlist authors who are grinding out success, not who just sort of had a huge hit and could write a 30-book series and live forever on it.
I think there's a massive amount of luck is in it. I will say as well that Nathan A. Thompson, brilliant author, wrote the Challenger's Call series and Soul Ship, and it's a brilliant series. And his book 3, I think it was, off the top of my head, Audible massively screwed it up when they launched. When you're talking about things that go wrong there, they uploaded the wrong file. The people were downloading a completely different book. Then they blamed him for it. Then they eventually came out and admitted it was their problem, but we'll fix it later on. And over about 3 weeks, it just didn't work. And by that point, if we're paying for this book, like as an indie, if you're paying for this book yourself, you're looking at a 20-hour book being a decent whack of money. We're looking at sort of 5,000, 10,000, depending on who the narrator is. You could be looking at 30,000 in costs. And then to have Audible absolutely massively cock it up and just go, we don't care, doesn't matter to us. And that's soul crushing, because you won't ever make that money back. The audio on that is a brilliant series that definitely deserves the love. And I'm a massive fan of that series, and I would love to see more of the audio going out for it. He's up to book 7 or 8 now, I think 8 or 9, in fact. And it's a case of when he gets enough money, he'll put another one out and then another one out. But it's very slow going, because Audible, the first 2 books, sold brilliant. And then they screwed up. And this is the sad reality of it. For those of us that succeed, that hit the Challenger's Call by Nathan A. Thompson, if you are very, very lucky and you launch your first book and it sells and you go, way, fantastic, done wonderful there, like Sanderson and so on have, and you are the 1% or the 0.001% who is the massive success, you have got a much better chance of being at the other end of the scale, where Amazon or Audible massively cock it up, and that can be a killer. And unfortunately, this is the sad reality of life, that we have to be prepared for that. And as publishers, we, generally speaking from our side of things, we would massively prefer it to be a trilogy so we can see how things go, but also that means that we can know how much we're investing and back you for it, really. And that's how we know if we're going to be willing to back into it, because we have to take into account that it could be that this is the best book that's ever been written, and Amazon crashes that day and just loses all your sales. And customer services go, it's good.
Yeah. I mean, it's the unfortunate reality of our market, especially the progression fantasy market, which is like,
I mean, can I just say, I think that's kind of why I'm glad there are web serial outlets, and Patreon, so authors can still kind of make money on the side without having to necessarily go to Amazon.
Yeah, and I'll throw in slightly, since it looks like we did lose Rhett for a minute. Some of the publishing companies that I've worked with in my various roles, there's a couple of them that are indie publishing companies that will not touch a series until they have 3 books written.
Sorry, nothing like a weird power surge.
No worries, man. Welcome back.
I'm sorry. I would just say, first of all, Audible takes 60%, not 70, which, that's just splitting hairs. We're just, but again, we are in a monopoly market.
Yeah, they have a dominance.
It's just how it is. But you could go write books for Spotify all you want. They're not going to treat you any better. That's the market we're in, and everyone curses Amazon. Without Amazon, not one of us would be up here right now.
Very much
so.
The
only reason we're up here. Without Amazon, you would be looking at a big 4 gatekeeper publisher, because the only way to self-publish was to carry a bunch of books in your garage. So unfortunately, Barnes & Noble and Borders and all these places decided never to put money into competing. And Amazon is the game. And it's the same with TradPub when you look at their numbers for audio and ebook. So the one benefit of working with a publisher is their contact at those places because shit can happen like that. If you have the right contacts, sometimes you can get ahead of it. Sometimes if Amazon freezes and breaks, there's nothing you could do, but those contacts do help.
Definitely. Yeah.
And like I was mentioning, there are publishers in the D&D space who will take you from a deal from book one, but they will require all like 3 books to be written before they'll begin the publishing process. And they, some of them have indicated that that's because of the throughput of 1, 2, 3 releases on a regular schedule really helps. But sometimes they also found that they just had issues with timetables or schedules or other pieces, and they just found it a more reliable way to process. So let's move into another question. We do have about 15 minutes left. We have a couple in here that I thought were really good, but let's go to Sharon's question here, which is, can you elaborate on what happens from first draft to a published book and why that process takes so long to the reader's perspective?
I don't think it takes long.
It doesn't to us, but that's because it's a blur to us.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the author, right? We release like a Hue Fights with Monsters and a Defiance of the Fall every 3 months, and that takes a crap ton of work, but it really depends on how fast the author produce. Like the indie publishing world is really fast, and I know 3 months seems long, but when you look at TradPub, you're looking at year-long waits once it goes up for pre-order. Authors taking as long as they want. We all know those famous series, but yeah, I mean, if we want to get something done really fast, we can. Audio can be tough, and I think that's probably where that question is coming from. These big name narrators, who again, we all know their names, there's a bunch, their backlogs are insane. These books are 20 plus hours, which is not what Audible was designed for, right? Audio was designed for normal 8-hour to 10-hour books, and 10-hour being a really long book. The indie world has really changed that. So yeah, these narrators get booked up, and if you want to sync launch things, that can be the huge delay. But I mean, indie publishing moves really, really fast.
Okay.
I'd say from my personal point of view, it's a case of I write about 5,000 words a day on an average, up to sort of 12 in very heavy days, but I don't do that on a regular basis. But that means that I can write a book from start to finish quite comfortably in a 3-month period, which is great. But then I need to get it into developmental editing, which for a 200,000 plus word will usually take about a month. It's a little bit less, it's a little bit more, it depends on what needs to be done to it. Then it comes back to me. I need to work on this, do any changes, goes off to line edits. They have it for about a month, comes back. I mean, you can get editors that will turn it around in 2 weeks. I'm quite happy with the month turnaround. It works quite well for us. Then you've got sort of science and continuity. You've got everything going on here. You've got formatting. A minimum from our experience is 3 months post the book being finished before that book is ready to be actually put out there. That's the minimum, really. And then it's literally a case of, at that point, once the book is now totally finished and you know it's good, if you're working with somebody like Podium or Tantor or whoever, or if you're doing it in-house, you've then got to just make the decision of, are you going to hold this book back for 6 months, 9 months? Some of the narrators we've approached, yeah, they're fantastic, want to work with you, brilliant, I can fit you in 2025. Right, do I want to hold on to a book for 2 years? No, I don't. So it's a case of you might pick somebody else, or if you want to wait for that narrator, you might release the book halfway between or at some point between, and you end up with these massive gaps where then, the narrator, if it's a 20-hour book, is going to take 3 weeks, a month to record that, possibly more, depending on who the narrator is. If you've got duet narration, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, then balancing, mastering. You're looking at audio, even if the narrator is ready for the manuscript as soon as you've finished it, as soon as it's finished the editing process, you're looking at least a month, then a few more weeks for upload and making sure of all the details. So you've got a massive gap, unfortunately. We've released sort of Arise, speaking personally, yesterday, day before Friday, and I know I won't expect that from Podium that we're working with that one until probably April, because it's people's schedules. It's just, there's no way of, if you've got really good narrators, as Rhett says, they're really busy. It's just getting the slots and getting in, and then pre-orders.
Scheduling ahead is, that's great until you don't meet the deadline, and then the narrator is expecting work, so that stuff becomes really, really, really tough. So that's why it depends on the author. It's why, hey, if you submit a fully written trilogy, that's great. You get it all edited in a row, all narrated in a row. There's a reason why, like Royal Road, Scribble Hub, and these web serial markets have brought in a lot of authors because they're giving enough words to craft into a trilogy fast, and that is the only way to turn these around fast. So really, waits are likely because that author isn't insanely fast like another author, and every author writes differently. Jez is a huge bestseller, but then some authors are writing 20,000 words a day, and I don't know how they do that without going insane, but they do. So you can't expect everyone to be at the same speeds.
No, I mean, I will caveat there that I have no idea how people get more words in than I do, because I feel
That's
like at
a lot,
times
yeah.
like working my fingers to the goddamn bone there. But the option is that if I don't do that, I've got to help with the kids and work around the house and stuff. So I'm working hard, right? I am working 9 to 5.
And
Yeah,
some
I mean,
authors take 2 years.
like I'll say I went through the Odyssey writing workshop, and I've gone through a lot of like high-end kind of critique groups with traditional published authors. So that helped, I think, hone my skills to the point where dev edits were pretty light. So there is depends on what approach, how long you've been doing it. If you just started writing like last year, then you're not going to be at the same level as someone who's been doing it for 10 or 20 years.
Jimmy, you got anything to throw into this one?
So the question was about how is it so slow between writing and publishing, right? I would flip that and say, how is it so fast? Because
Yeah.
you have because you have to think that there are many people involved in this, and maybe when you look at this as a passion project, you might be working overtime, you might be working weekends. But if you want to do this full time, you have to think of it as an actual profession. You have to think that I work 9 to 5 or whatever works for you, whatever your creative timetable is per day. Let's say Monday to Friday, because I need the weekend to stay sane and be able to write 20 books in a row. So if you think that you have 40 hours to write and edit and do whatever it is, it's really, we're writing and releasing books really fast. And if you, from a reader's perspective, if you want to continue seeing good books, and if you want to see your favorite authors continue writing great books, we should take a step back and prioritize. Let's say I won't say quality over quantity, but like healthy. Let's say healthy quantity, or I think that would be the best approach for me, because books are really coming out fast in the indie space.
And just remember, if it's up for pre-order, that doesn't even mean it's done and or written.
I will add on to that just quickly, in that if, regardless of whether this is your first book or your 50th or wherever you are in the cycle, do take the time out. Because of my nature, I throw myself into things 100% to try and just, because I feel guilty if I'm not working. This is how I was raised. I need to be busy all the time. But if you continually do this, I was finishing a book on Friday, starting a new one on Monday, and I am now taking 2 weeks off at the end of each book to spend 2 weeks. I'm in the middle of a cycle right now where I am gaming on Starfield, and I'm kicking that game's ass. But the point is that if you just go, I'm fine, fuck it, just keep going and just go, you can burn yourself out. And I was amazed this year at DragonCon by how many authors that I look up to, that I really respect, and who, when we've talked about it, have said, oh yeah, well, I've been really burned out this year. I've been dealing with failures. I've been looking in the mirror and I don't like who I see, because I'm judging myself on my production and I'm judging myself on this or that. I'm losing the creativity. Stop. Take some time out. Remember that if you're going to make this a career, which we all want it to be a career for our lives because we love this, take the damn time out. Deal with burnout. If you start to feel stress, you start to feel worn out with it, take some time. Take a step back. We have a Discord. feel free to reach out to me. Just join us. Just talk some shit if you want. You don't have to do anything else. But we're always there because we know how bad it is at times. So please, just look after yourselves, because there's some amazing authors out there, and I'm an absolute bastard because I really want those books to be written because I'm really enjoying reading them. So this is sort of self-help. I want you all to be able to keep writing because,
Right. And we're at a 5-minute warning here. So we're going to take, there's a pretty nice question here at the end from George. We'll go to each person to give a comment on it, which is, what is the sweet spot? Is there a sweet spot for any book length? Let's start with Abby.
I mean, probably 100,000 words, but I write bigger. So the books I've written are either 60,000 or like 250,000. So I have a few that are 150,000 or so. And look, I write bigger. I think a lot of lit RPG authors write bigger. So, just depends on the subgenre. But yeah, exactly. Like, who doesn't like big books? Come on.
Let's go to Demi next.
So if you are paying for the audio and for your edits, I would say reaching if you can afford it, right? Reaching the 20-hour mark will net you a higher price point per book sale on Audible. If you can do that. If not, 10 hours for audio, so it would be like 95, 100,000 words. Of course, everything that I'm saying is taking, knowing that your story can handle this, right? Don't stretch out the book. If you're not paying it, the publisher is paying, write book one as 400,000 words because you don't care about the costs, and you will see a large uptick in page reads on Kindle Unlimited. And of course, if someone sees 40-45, Red doesn't like this. if an audiobook listener sees a 40-hour audiobook, they will grab it most probably. And
Nobody
also
will sign you though.
yeah, of course. And of course, every time on every series, book one sells more than every book in your subsequent books. So book one should be the largest one. That's something to think of when you're kind of outlining, if you're an outliner. Book one larger, book two you can make with smaller books. This is how I think of numbers. This is not legal advice and all that.
Let's go to Rhett next.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about subgenre is the most important thing. Again, Googling industry standard book lengths isn't going to help you here. It won't help you in indie. It won't help you in trad. Progression fantasy lit RPG, which is what I'm guessing most people in here are looking for. We tend to see the best return on above 120, 130,000 words. That goes on audio too, up to like 200. When you get beyond 200, especially on audio, you're just spending more and not getting as much return. So, that's sort of the sweet spot. 400, like Demi said, is you have to bring a huge ass audience for anyone to want to pay for an audiobook that long and not just split it into 2 books because, that's super expensive. But if you're doing romance or thriller, 50 to 80,000 words, science fiction tends to want to be between 80 and 100. So it really depends on subgenre. If you're looking at TradPub, don't hand in your 200,000+ word epic fantasy. They're not going to sign it because you're a debut author. That takes up too much shelf space, and shelf space is all that matters in TradPub. So where they could put 2 books, they'd have to put your one. If you're not Brandon Sanderson or someone at that level, they're not going to put your book there. So if you're a newer author and if TradPub is something you're looking into, you want to hit those normal range books. If you're writing an epic fantasy, 120,000 words or so, not this huge tome, but something sellable, something printable. But yeah, indie 120 to 200, a little bit higher is typically our sweet spot in this genre.
Cool. And Jez with the last word.
I would say 200,000. That's the way all of my books have been, sort of 180,000. I think is my smallest. My biggest is 413. The audio, I totally agree. The audio on that one, I did get shafted because it was 44 hours long. and it released. And on the day of release, Amazon put it in the sale. So that kind of shafted us. But other than that, it's just a case of write the story that your book deserves, whether it's whatever length it is. It's better, as Dimmy said, don't just drag the story out to make it fit. I write bigger stories because I like to read bigger stories, and because of the way that my mind works, I'm batshit crazy. So I'm all over the place, and I like to have side adventures. I like to have things going on. So I aim for around 200,000, and sometimes they're a little bit bigger, sometimes a little bit smaller, but yeah, that's the best one for me. So as you can tell, there is no complete answer because we're all going, well, I think this and I think that. So
Awesome.
I think
So,
the most important thing is this is a KU and Audible genre. Longer works. So don't page reads and Audible length will lead you to sell more. But some authors aren't going to write bigger than 120,000, 100,000 words. So, we have to expand our search. But yeah, 200 for a book one is excellent.
Awesome. So it looks like we're just over the time slot. So let's call it. Thank you guys for coming out. Thank everybody for the questions. You guys were awesome.
no, thank you, mate. Really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it. Thank you, Jay. And thank you all.
Thanks. Thank you.